Matt Common, it's extraordinary what the RBA, the government, and the Commonwealth Bank itself has announced today. You must be very worried about the economy.
Well, as you said, Elise, it is an extraordinary time and it requires extraordinary measures. And what we're seeing is a coordinated set of measures across the government, from the central bank today. The regulator APRA made an announcement and we've responded to the RBA's decision. We've made a number of pricing changes, as you mentioned, to make sure we're directing the greatest amount of support to the areas of the community that need it most, which in our opinion is particularly for small business customers. We're also hugely supportive of the Reserve Bank's announcement around their term funding facility, which we think is going to provide abundant source of cheap funding to further support business customers in the coming months.
How worried are you about the economy?
Very. I mean, we're seeing considerable demand shock to the economy, which will continue to flow through for many months. It's something we have not seen for a considerable period of time, and there's every reason to be concerned at this particular point in time. But it's also really important that we bear in mind we will get through it. It won't be just 3 months, it's going to be an extended period of time, but there's a lot of measures that are being put in place, some very strong fiscal stimulus. There's further rounds and additional measures that all of us are considering, and we stand ready to serve the country, to serve our customers, and most importantly, to make sure that we're facilitating economic growth and supporting small businesses get through such a challenging period.
Do you believe this is looking like it's going to be worse than the GFC?
I think based on what we're seeing at the moment, it is. I mean, the GFC was quite different though. It was much more around a failure in the financial system and lack of trust, particularly between financial institutions. And clearly that caused a real shock on the economy, both globally and to a lesser extent domestically. What we're seeing at the moment, and of course, we don't really know the full impact, but if you look at some of the measures that are necessary to reduce the spread of infection across the community, to keep our customers and our people and our citizens safe, then some of those measures are going to have a very significant impact on the economy. We can hope, of course, that they're short-lived. There's a number of people that are working extremely hard on, I think, some very effective containment measures. And from a financial institution perspective, we need to work very closely with government and our regulators and ensure that we're providing maximum support and stimulus to all parts of the economy, and particularly for small businesses. We need to keep them viable and operating. We need to keep people in their jobs, because there will be a strong recovery at the other side of this. We've just got to make sure we can get as many businesses across this challenging period as possible.
I'll get to those measures that you've got in place in just a moment, but before that, are you seeing distress in mortgages yet?
No, we're not. It's very early, of course. It's really been an escalation over the last few weeks, and our housing book continues to perform very well. There's still been quite strong volumes around home loan applications in recent times. What we can see as some of the early indicators is more about some of the consumption and expenditure across the economy, which is in some areas is well above average. So in areas like supermarkets or pharmacies, clearly well above the level of expenditure you would expect. But of course, in travel, tourism, education, student accommodations, anything on a cross-border basis, we're seeing quite dramatic deceleration. And as we look forward across the millions of small businesses that provide such a substantial amount of the overall economic growth as well as employment, we're very concerned about making sure that we're putting strong support in place to help our customers and the economy get through a very difficult few months which are ahead of us.
Are you seeing distress among your business borrowers yet? Surely you are, given that this has been going on for quite some time, for particularly, as you mentioned, tourism businesses, those that are trade exposed.
Yes, we absolutely are. We're seeing more requests that are coming in for financial assistance. We've got customers that are concerned, scared, some that are worried directly about their current financial situation. They're very apprehensive about what might be coming next. We're seeing requests for liquidity, temporary facilities. We see that on both the consumer side as well. We've got right across different parts of the economy, customers coming to us as they should, and this is our role, is to facilitate economic growth and most importantly to serve our customers and to serve the country. And so we're keeping all of our operations, as you would expect, open. We're trying to put as much resources as we possibly can against serving all of our customers, whether that be in branches, in business banking centres, in all of our Australian-based call centres. We want to make sure that we're there for our customers. We are, of course, in parts of our organisation experiencing quite high loads and volumes, but that's to be expected. We need to work very closely with customers and support them through a very challenging set of conditions which are completely outside of their control.
I know you have a lot of measures being put in place, but foreclosures in housing and in business are inevitable, aren't they, if this is going to be as bad or worse than the GFC?
Well, I think it's certainly, we're turning our minds to, of course, not what's just happening today and next week, but also how do we think the next 12 months are going to play out. It's really important that we're working really closely with our customers, and from a business perspective, we want to keep as many of those viable businesses operating for an extended period of time through such a challenging economic period. That's going to mean that we're going to need to provide greater support and flexibility than we ordinarily would. We hope that we can get all of the viable businesses, as the RBA Governor has said, across the bridge to the other side of the ravine that's quickly approaching us. I think it's much too early to say we're in the same sort of conditions on our home lending book, but of course, the biggest driver of that is employment, and that's why it's so important that we're able to support business customers who can keep their employees in jobs, in paid jobs, for an extended period of time, to give people the opportunity to return their lives eventually back to normal. And we're seeing, of course, a lot of actions from the federal government, and I expect there's going to be a number of different measures that will come through. We're working very closely with the government and with our regulators on the next step of series of measures, and there's a real commitment to make sure that we get through this and we continue to make sure that Australia is a fantastic and prosperous place for all of us to live.
The RBA and government measures today, in hand with the banks, will support business lending in particular to try and keep SMEs open. But this is just more debt. We've seen this with farms before. When the drought is on, they can't necessarily just take on more debt without knowing what the future is. Businesses are going to close. We can't rescue this economy with more debt, can we?
Well, I think from some of those businesses that you're referring to, they're going to need direct financial assistance at zero cost, so not a loan, and that can only really come from the federal and in some cases from the state government. So I know that the government.
And so is that what we need now? Now that we've seen what the government has revealed so far, now that we've seen what the RBA has come up with, do we need the governments to now be talking about checks to businesses, checks to households?
Well, I know that they're considering a range of different measures, and I'm very supportive of the steps that have been taken to date. Of course, as the situation has continued to escalate in recent times, of course, subsequent measures will be required. And for some businesses, they're going to need direct financial assistance so that they can keep paying their people and their employees and keep their businesses viable. And of course, one of the steps that the RBA announced today was a term funding facility, which is going to provide access to funding at very low rates, so 25 basis points for financial institutions to be able to draw on abundant sources of liquidity. And it's not quite the same as just injecting cash directly into businesses, but we're looking at a borrowing rate which is going to be very low. It's some time before, it's over the next month or so before that facility will be available, but it's going to need a combination of measures from both the government as well as from financial institutions, both today and how we support and keep those businesses operating.
You're the biggest lender in the country. How soon do businesses and households need cash from the government?
Well, I think in some sectors of the economy, we would say that they're needing support directly from us and for wherever they can get it right now. There's others that are actually trading well above their ordinary operating performance. And I do think, of course, it's going to be heavily correlated with the broader operating conditions. And the government, I think, is doing a very good job about keeping essential services and the economy operating. Of course, if schools were to close en masse, if it was even greater restrictions, as we've seen certainly in other parts of the globe, then that, of course, is going to have a larger impact on hospitality sector. And as people change really the way that they're living in Australia, then that can have a direct impact on some parts of the economy. And we've just got to support people through this period. because we are going to get through it, and we are going to be able to get back to an ordinary or more normal state of living. And there is every reason to be absolutely optimistic about the Australian economic prospects, and we just need to help all of us get through to the other side and keep the Australian economy performing well without having a negative impact on our customers and certainly on the broader economic prosperity of Australia.
Just one more question. I know we're tight for time, but this is first and foremost a health crisis which has escalated into a financial and economic crisis. We fix the health, we fix the economy. Does the government need to step in with more drastic and swift measures to address the health side of this so that we can deal with this more quickly?
Well, look, I think they've been on the front foot very early. And I think of course, it's a very dynamic and fluid situation in Australia, as it is in every country. And we've seen more measures announced from the government today. Clearly, they're trying to, and very focused, as we all are, on making sure we're containing the transmission of this virus across the community. We've also got to balance that about what's the economic impacts. And clearly, we're going to prioritise health, but ultimately, it's going to take some time before we've got the health situation under control. And from what I can see, I think they're making very good decisions around that. And we just need to keep working very closely together, supporting and communicating with across large businesses and the government, and then making sure that we're helping to provide them with the information so they can make the best possible decisions. And of course, we're going to take the steps that we think are most important and appropriate to support our customers in the parts of the economy that need it most. And that's evidenced by the decisions that we made today in response to the Reserve Bank's announcements.